Hey podcast, welcome back to another episode. Now today we've got Jack Redding on the podcast. Now Jack is a pro downhill racer, he owns his own coaching company and he also owns a race team as well, so you'll find today super interesting. We talk about all sorts of different things, from how to balance riding and training with family life. He's just had his first child, so we go into detail about that and about how that's changed his life. We chat all about the changes to World Cup downhill and how that's affecting him and all of the other riders and tons more things. So I think you'll find this episode really, really interesting. I hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, let's get into it. So you're now a dad?
Yeah, man, what a change. yeah. Blake's 13 months, so it's it's funny. The things that I always said would never change, and they do.
Like what?
Some of your perspectives, some of the ways you think, some of the things you do. Can't think of an example off the top of my head. It'll probably come back to me, but yeah, just things that I always saw parents doing, and you're like, or hear the way they used to talk, and you're like, at the time, I'm like, nah, that won't be me. And yeah, in a lot of ways, you do end up changing. So yeah.
I've heard people before say this sort of similar kind of thing, that they're never going to be the parent that only talks about the kids. And I've heard before that no one likes listening to other people's kids, but you love talking about your own.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and because I don't have younger siblings or younger cousins, or to be honest, until now, haven't had friends with kids, so I've not been interested at all in like hanging out with kids or talking about kids. So I'm acutely aware of that. So with ours, I don't like, I don't kind of do that anyway. But I'm still now, like if we're hanging out with our friendship group that have all got kids around the same age as Blake, I'm just not interested in playing games, particularly with theirs, or I just don't have that. I don't know if it's more kind of a woman thing or not, but whereas if it's Blake, I'm just like...
Play with him all day long.
Oh, mate, I'm literally finishing work and I'm like rushing home.
Oh,
even
really?
if I can get 20 minutes with him before he goes to bed. Or even just like on a day where I've been at Llangollen, for example, coaching, it's a 14-hour day, and by the time I get back, it's usually around 7 if it's a weekday. And I am blitzing the last part of that drive just to give him a hug before he goes to sleep. Yeah. Like, and until you do it, you don't kind of realise. So I guess that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah. What was it like when he was born?
Oh,
I imagine that. So for reference, people listening, we just got married in August.
Yep.
So now we're very much in that phase where we may end up having kids, we may not. Like, you're in that transition phase after marriage. But I imagine, like, what was it like, the whole process of like pregnancy through to birth and whatnot?
So my wife absolutely bossed pregnancy. Like, she glowed, I guess you would call it, throughout the whole thing. I was shocked because she's so like, you go on holiday and Sarah's the one who's going to get an allergic reaction or something will happen. You'll end up in hospital with my wife on holiday. There's so many examples, it's untrue. She's even done it to me at a World Cup in Australia where side of the track she ate a cereal bar without checking what was in it in the middle of the forest, and she's allergic to nuts.
Oh, nightmare.
So I'm at the bottom, just finished my run, trying to enjoy the end of the race and like come down from it all, and I get a call from my best mate's missus, who was with Sarah. Oh yeah, Sarah's had an allergic reaction. She's in the ambulance. Don't panic. Oh, brilliant.
So I spent the word panic in ambulance.
Yeah. I spent the rest of the day in my race kit in the hospital, like no food. Like anyway, but so she bossed pregnancy. She bossed labour, and then pregnancy she bossed, and then labour was a different story. Like Blake was big, and first one, so it was just like go through the process. She'd done this whole hypnobirthing malarkey and tried to do it the whole natural, and it was too big. Right. So we ended up, because of all the NHS shortages, we ended up like away in Blackburn in a birth centre, but that one wasn't attached to a labour ward in a hospital. If you have kids, you'll find out about all this shit.
Absolutely, this is an education.
So the nearest hospital was 30 minutes away. And at 2:30 in the morning, when stuff went sideways, very sideways, and she needed the help of a doctor, and so did he, we were a half an hour ambulance journey. We had to wait for the ambulance for 25 minutes. Oh my God. So I was driving down the motorway at 2:30 in the morning in the middle of a storm, having a panic attack, trying to get to this hospital, wondering if I've ever see either of them again. So,
that's horrific.
So the birth thing was like a nightmare. But then we went, like, as soon as they did the C-section in the end, she was fine, he was fine. And I had like PTSD for 2 weeks for sure. I had to keep I had to write it all out to get it out of my head, and like, whereas she was on that many painkillers by the end, she couldn't remember it. I was like, brilliant. So yeah, like that element of it was tough. But as soon as he was here, it's just been like a constant like learning process. And my kind of feeling is every stage gets better than the one before. You just get more back from him. They develop little personalities and become little characters, and each stage is just better than the one before. And like I say, he's 13 months now, he's running around and such a little character. So yeah, just dropped him at nursery and see him later.
Did you do a lot of learning about what to do before the baby came?
My wife did.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
my wife did. I'm very lucky in the sense Sarah was absolutely on it with that. I did very little. Listened to a couple of podcasts. I think I made a mistake of they were quite Americanized. And
Okay.
I was playing golf a lot in 2022, like almost daily, because I get when I do something,
Touchy.
I get quite addicted to shit. Yeah. So I was almost playing golf every day. I got down to playing off like 10 and was absolutely loving it as a hobby. I've played 3 times since Blake was born. But I tried to listen to podcasts while I was playing golf about that, and just boring. And just telling me stuff that I was like, I don't need to know that. And I kept trying to learn stuff. And thankfully, Sarah was real organised, and I kind of learnt on the job off the back of her, really. So, and then just trying to have time alone with them helps, like, because if Sarah's around, I just let her carry me, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
Whereas like on a Saturday now, every other Saturday, Sarah's working again now. So we have like
A full day
Dan
together.
and Blake time, and it's like real good. We went and watched my mechanic play rugby on Saturday. Shout out to Sam. He actually broke his back. Yeah, horrendous. Got stamped on by a big guy.
Oh my lord.
Yeah, and he shouldn't be playing rugby. I told him, I was like, what are you doing? Like, you got my build and you're playing rugby union.
Not a rugby
for
player
older.
build.
Yeah, so literally, I went and had a day out and watched Sam. Unfortunately, that ended really badly, and we found out he's broken part of his. So that's 2 of my team this year, Dan at Valdesol, and now Sam playing rugby.
Nightmare.
2 of my team this year with broken backs. Like, Jesus. But yeah, anyway, I'm starting to wander a bit
going
there,
off on a
so-
tangent. It's good. It's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Oh no, I bet it was mad. What was it like bringing him home for the first night? Was it weird that you've just suddenly got this
Honestly,
child to
mate,
look after?
nah. It maybe would have been if the birth. I can't tell you how traumatic the birth was.
Oh,
it
it
was
sounds-
the most
sounds
horrendous.
horrific.
experience.
I
I
can't
thought I was going
imagine.
to lose my wife and my
Yeah.
kid, mate. Like, it was the most traumatic experience I've ever had. Like, it's bringing back memories now,
I
like
bet.
30 months later, and so afterwards, it was just everything was just a relief. Like, I'd be walking my dog and just start crying.
Oh,
Like, it was literally horrendous. So
yeah.
the point I'm making is it was just it felt like such a blessing to just be back at home with them, because so many people had said that to us, that you leave the hospital and you're just like, what do I do? I didn't get that at all. I was just like, get me out of here.
Yeah, of course.
Get us home.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
away from the experience we've just had. So no, it was just mint. And Sarah had the C-section, so I had to be on it from the start. And honestly, like, it's hard. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, it's hard to remember back through the stages. Like, I even look at pictures of him from when he was like 4 months old or whatever, and I'm like, you look so different now. Like, I can't even remember him when he was like that. So I think as a parent of a youngster, I think your brain's, certainly a woman's brain, I think you're designed to forget that shit.
That
or
makes
you
sense.
wouldn't do it again.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
because
forget the
sometimes
pain.
when you're up in the morning and they're screaming and you've like tried the milk and you've tried this and that and they just still won't stop screaming, and you're like, you just want to pull your ears off. Like, I think you are designed to literally forget that, so you'll procreate again. 'Cause,
Yeah.
otherwise you just wouldn't do it again.
yeah, especially with what you've been through.
yeah, exactly. So
Has it changed your perspective on, obviously your life pre-Blake was obviously your wife and work, but it's very focused on racing. It's had to be, hasn't it, to live the life that you've had and to perform to the level you've had. Has that changed since you've had Blake? I mean, you've stopped racing. I presume that's maybe part of the decision, but
So I've only stopped racing
a month ago.
at World Cup level.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So I getting asked this a lot at the moment, and I've not stopped racing at all.
I didn't know that.
No. I've only stopped racing World Cup level purely
Okay.
because of the changes. If they hadn't made the changes that ESO have made with this reduction to 30 in the final,
So so for somebody like me, I know there's been changes and
Yeah.
there's now semi-finals and whatnot, isn't there? But I
Yeah.
definitely don't know all the changes. People
I'll-
listening won't. So
I'll
what
try
are they?
run through it as in the most simplistic way as possible. So in 2018, they dropped finals from 80 to 60.
Yeah.
So that was the main change that they did. Before that, I could just roll down in qualifying and come in top 80.
Okay.
It wasn't a stressful process. You do your practice up until that point. Quali would be around run 10 or 11, and I could just, if I wanted to, if say I had a crash or say there was something I was worried about condition-wise on the track, no pressure, I could get in. And then if I wanted to push for like a top 20, top 30, I could take the risk and do that. Top 20 got points. ESO have come in, and for 2023, they've now changed it. So the top 60 qualify for a semi-final. Now, in a lot of ways, that was an improvement because it meant that everybody who got through to that semi-final was now featured in some kind of TV. And on this year's semi-finals has been shown on YouTube, which has been great. So we've all got TV time. I qualified for 6 out of 8 into the semi-final. So those 6, what I was calling my race run, because it's the old race, that top 60, was shown on the TV. However, that wasn't the final. You had to be top 30 in that semi-final to then go up the hill again.
Oh, okay.
And that was called the final. Now, there's been strange things they've done where in the semi-final, only you didn't get ranking points. So I've had results between 37th and 56th in those 6 semi-finals, but I haven't achieved any UCI points.
And do you need points to race again next year?
Yeah. So
right.
all my points are from Portugal Cups.
Yeah.
So like coming 8th at a Portugal Cup has granted me more UCI points than coming 37th in a World Cup semi-final.
Wow, which is bizarre, isn't it?
Which is a joke.
Yeah.
It's a joke, and it's an oversight. What they did was, I need to word this carefully because I'd like to be quite offensive, because this is our lives and our career that they're fucking around with by getting these things wrong. But what they've done is they've brought in this new semi-final, and the UCI and ESO haven't coordinated properly. What they should have done is in the semi-final, everyone from 31st to 60th should have got points, because we weren't going to ride again that weekend.
Yeah.
The reason they've not given points for the semi is because the top 30 were going to ride again in the final.
Yeah.
So they didn't want to give them double points. So those guys went through to the final and got loads of points.
Yeah, I'm with you. But if they did 31 to 60, then we'd
just get our points and we'd be done for the day.
Yeah.
Same as last year. They were giving us points like that, 31 to 60, for the series.
Right.
So we were getting series points, but no ranking points on the UCI website. So basically, that's some of the changes they've made. So one of the reasons I'm stopping racing World Cups is the bullshit that's going on, in my eyes, from ESO and from Warner Brothers and the UCI. Because I'm 34 now, 35 in December. I've been racing World Cups for 14 years. I've seen loads of changes, and I'm now seeing this era of incredibly talented young riders come through, which I have the privilege of coaching a lot of the UK guys. And trying to compete with them now is really, really difficult. You can be as focused and as fit and as fast as you want, but they have been bred to race mountain bikes, whereas we weren't. My mountain biking when I was a kid up until a teenager was bashing down bridleways, like we all did.
Yeah.
Whereas now, these guys are, like, I'm coaching 10-year-olds who are so skillful, they're more skillful than me. Like, they're doing like suis and they've got incredible skills at the age of 10 and 11. So once they get big and strong, they've then got the skills as well. So it's hard to compete. So I'm and then there's the family stuff and the mortgage and that side. So there's multiple reasons why I've looked at World Cup level, look at the risks I've now got to take to try and get the top 20 or 30s, which is what I want. Coming down and coming 42nd don't really do anything for me, because I've had 18th, I've had 19th, I've qualified 7th, and where I see myself being, the level of risk I now have to take to try and achieve that and then still not be guaranteed.
Yeah.
I've decided it's time to hang my hat up. So stopping the World Cups, but I'll still be racing all the Portugal Cups, select UK races, European Cups. And there's 2 main reasons for that. One is racing's my hobby. I'd never, like a lot of the guys I compete against, it wasn't a job from a young age. I started racing World Cups at 21. And for me, it's just been a dream to race up against these guys. Like, I remember being in a bar in Whistler in 2009, watching Steve Peat win world champs in Australia. And at that point, I still never thought I'd race a World Cup. And I think I was 20. Like, so to then 2 years later, or maybe even the following year, I can't remember. I think it was the following year, to line up in Maribor against these guys. Brooke McDonald was behind me in the start gate, and he'd just won world champs against Danny the year before. I just felt like I was just on holiday.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So to have the career I've had has been a dream, and I'm so lucky to have had it. But I'm now in a position where at that level, I'm going to hang my hat up. But I love racing, that's what I'm saying. So I'm going to keep racing because I want to.
Yeah.
You'd have to cut my legs off to try and stop me. The second reason is with my coaching that I do, the value in my coaching, or one of the values, is me being on track with the guys.
That makes
and
sense.
Putting it bluntly, to be able to humble them. They might think they've done something well, but if I can either demo it on camera or demo it in front of them, or we can put GoPros together mirrored on iPhones or laptops and they can see what my line is compared with theirs, it's easier for them to visualize what's next. So part of the value in my coaching is being better than the guys I'm coaching. It's hard when I get towards Dan and a new rider who we're going to take because they're as fast as me.
Yeah.
So we then have to work together and mirror it, and they might have time on me here. So I'm like, nice, but look, I've got time on you there. So if you can put together your good bit and add my good bit, which with Dan, it's usually the fast stuff. He's incredibly talented on like steep technical stuff, but I'm usually quicker than him on out and out off the brakes, hauling speed because I've been racing World Cups for longer. So he borrows time off me there, and by race run, he uses his 20-year-old not giving a shit brain and goes and sends it. So yeah, still be racing. I think back to your original question, like, was you're asking me about mindset changed over?
Yeah, originally, and then
So basically, like, it started when Sarah was pregnant, and it was worse last year than this year. At the
changes started.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. My psychological changes at the races started while she was pregnant because it was this big unknown of like what is about to happen to my life.
Yeah.
And look at these risks I'm taking. I don't think it helped. I was carrying an injury, so I was like, that was in there. Whereas this year I've been fit and healthy again. I've just been loving my racing. So this year has been a lot more clarity, and that's when I decided to retire. I was like, at Lenzerheide, I qualified 45th. It was a very stressful race run, took huge risks, looked at the time gap back to 61st, and I was like, holy shit, one more mistake and I wouldn't have been racing.
Right.
So I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm going to finish the season, I'm going to race the season out and enjoy it, but I'm going to hang my World Cup boots up at the end of the year. But psychology-wise at the races, like, it's been better this year than last year because he's here. And I've gone, oh, actually, not that much is different. My life is exactly the same, really. I've just got this awesome little dude that I hang around with. So yeah, it is a change, but I guess you got to compartmentalize and be like, I'm at work now, and then I'm at home now. And
have you always found that easy to do? I noticed on the video I was watching before, you practice quality. It was either practice or quality, I forget which, when it was Blake's birthday.
Monson. Yeah, exactly.
So was that practice or quali? I forget which one it was.
It was practice day.
And I know you said on video then that you were really struggling because you felt like you should be at home with Blake. So
yeah. So I'd cut my leg open in snowshoe, and then it got infected. That happened. That infection really come out that morning, and it was like, so I was unsure to that point, and I was down to the pharmacy. Like, literally, I was still standing in this pharmacy 10 minutes before practice started, and we get 3 hours practice, which is not a lot. You're in that 3 hours, you're up and down the lift. You might have mechanicals, especially in Montserrat, you're going to get punctures. You're going to wreck wheels. So stressful. And I just felt like I should have been at home, like it was my son's birthday. So yeah, there are times when, and this is where your sports psychology training comes in. And to be honest, I probably would have caught better if it had been a quali or a race day. Because practice day, I try and be quite relaxed. Yeah, I try and build my practice. I'm very experienced.
You can think about everything else, can't you, when you're in that mindset?
Yeah, so exactly. So those thoughts crept in. Whereas if it had been a quali day, nothing's fucking entering my head. Like, we are running through process.
So when you say nothing's entering your head, because obviously most people listening to this won't race at that level, but they might do hard rock, they might do events 100%. Which to them is their World Cup essentially, or just going out on a weekend. You know, a lot of us ride to forget about home life and whatnot, but then I can definitely be the same. If something's going on at home and I'm feeling anxious for whatever reason, it's hard to not have that crossover into your riding. So you do your first run of the day and you're like, I can feel that anxiety from my life creeping into my riding. So you said that you have to for your job to switch it off. How do you do that?
So there's varying ways of doing it. Obviously, everybody's different, so you'd need to have your own way. I'm going to use you an example in a second because of what you said. And part of my job as a coach is this. So the race coaching I do, everything's covered. And basically, what you've just asked me, the answer to that is have your own process. So I'll use you as an example with what you've just said. With that first run, you can feel that anxiety creep in or whatever. You'd need to have some kind of process around the start of your ride where you actively say to yourself, right, we're going out to chill or whatever, to forget this or just relax. So I would literally say to myself before I left the house, what's stressing me out at the moment? And I'd let it in. Some of this stuff's from the Chimp Paradox. I don't know if anyone's read that book, but my sports psychologist that I've worked with for years, I've worked with that model for about 10, 12 years. Okay. So I'd let those feelings in, but then I'd have a process I went through where I then would say to myself, right, we're going to leave those behind. Now, if that was really difficult and you'd still feel anxiety on the first run, I'd maybe even allow myself to have a very relaxed first run and accept that some of that stuff may still be kind of there, and focus on trying to find some fun on that first lap, because the fun element will ultimately be what gets rid of it. So the message is have a process that you fall back on, because at the races, that's what I do. Like my warm up before a race run will be 30 minutes plus however long it takes me to visualize the track before I start my warm up.
Okay.
And then 30 minutes before I'm going to leave the start gate, the same music will start and I will jump on the turbo, and then my warm up is in X amount of blocks.
So that again, just a bit slower.
Sorry.
No, you don't.
Because it's so obvious to me.
It's just because I know that I lost track then. So say that again.
So let's say my start time is 10:30.
Yeah.
My warm up will start at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Let's say the track is 3 minutes long. I will start visualizing the track at 9:57.
Okay.
Geared towards jump, and that I'll even visualize the track at the same
for 3
song.
minutes and run through it in your head.
It might not take me 3 minutes, but the idea with visualization is it's as close to the perfect run as possible.
Okay.
So yeah, I would allow myself that amount of time, visualize the track. It's always to the same song. Once I'm done, whether it's shorter or longer, check the time. I'm up on the turbo at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then my warm up is a 30-minute process. And the point I'm making is I might be nervous in the pits 50 minutes before my run, but I know that I can just say to myself, yep, you feel like shit, it's fine. I know that as soon as my warm-up starts, all that will just the best way to say it is it's giving me goosebumps thinking about it now, because I love racing so much. Like, it will just fade away into the background. And it will just become white noise, because that music starts, mindset kicks in, and I'm already just like sat on the turbo going through my process. And my process is a build up into super aggression about 15 to 20 minutes into the warm up, where you could probably get me to fight anyone. Even though I'd lose, I'd still be so like ready for what's about to go down. But you don't want to leave the start gate like that.
Yeah.
So then there's like a little bit of a come down where the music changes, the mindset changes, come off the turbo, and there's other things that are going on in between the turbos, sessions with like other kind of warm-up stuff. And then about 8 minutes before the run, we're kind of really starting to simmer down. 5 minutes before we're joining the line, I'm with my mechanic, we've got the same things with us. And then 2 to 3 minutes before the run, everything's nice and calm, and I'm just focusing on two things: hit my marks and go out and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like, and the point I'm making is, if you've got a process, other things can't enter your head, because I'm so busy just following my process.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost like when you're in the gym, as a random example, you do a set of squats. You might worry about something before you're doing the squats, but when you've got a heavy bar on your back and you're squatting, you're not thinking about anything else. You're just thinking about moving the bar down and up in your technique. So your race is almost starting 30 minutes before the actual,
100%.
or 33 minutes before the start. That's really interesting.
The other thing as well with what you just said, the thought popped into my head. A lot of people probably feel guilty with what you've just said. So for me, it's work. So I'm not going to feel guilty going through these processes and leaving the other thoughts behind most of the time. Obviously, I did when it was Blake's birthday, because it was harder, because it was something huge. But people are probably going to feel guilty if they've had a hard day at work or a hard week, and then maybe had a fight with their wife or whatever, and they've then gone for a ride to clear their head, to feel better, to come home a better person at the end of it. They're probably going to go out for the ride and feel guilty, because they're going to feel like they should be at home.
Yeah.
But you've got to give yourself permission to go out and clear your head, to then come back and be a better person, if that makes sense.
I 100% agree. You may have seen on Instagram that that's something that I'll regularly kind of post, because
sure.
I think so many people, I think especially if you're a young single lad, you don't have the responsibility, so it doesn't matter. But then you get a partner, and then you get a wife, and it changes again. It feels even more like you've got an even greater responsibility. I can only imagine that's amplified when you've got a kid. A mortgage is similar, and I think some people do feel guilty for taking that time to train and that time to ride. But I think with me, for Sophie, she would never guilt me for riding or training, but she didn't understand the effect it has on my mental health. And now she gets that I need the time to ride or to train to keep my mental health good. 100%. And I even notice if you go on holiday for a week or two and you don't train, you feel you're not yourself. So I totally agree with you. It's also interesting what you were talking about there with the chimp paradox. So I've not read that book in a long time, but for those listening, you've got that inner chimp, which essentially is, it wants its own way, doesn't it? And it's screaming at you. I think So let's say that inner chimp is shouting about worrying about paying the mortgage or worrying about that fight you've just had with your wife. I think a lot of people would think you have to stifle that voice. And it's really interesting what you said is that you actually fully let it out of the box to start with.
Yep.
And then because it's had that time to think about it, then you can put it away a bit more easily.
100%.
And that's really interesting because I would think that an athlete would just be really great at just putting the lid on that pan. And actually, you're letting the lid off for a while in a controlled environment before you need to, so you can then have that 30 minutes before you race.
It depends which way you are. Some people will be like you said, like they'll just put a lid on it. Dan's a little bit like that, I think. I was trying to think of an example I could use, and Dan won't mind me using him as an example. He'll just crack on. He's not very emotional, really. Can be, but most of the time he'll just put a lid on it and go, and he'll just ride fast. Whereas I am a thinker, and it's better for me to actually identify what's bothering me, because then I'll deal with it better.
Yeah.
Like once I've fully, like you said, let those thoughts out, let them have their moment. And that's how it was described to me by my sports psychologist. It was something along the lines of, let those negative thoughts have their moment and then put them away and focus on positives. So let's say I'm worried about one section of a track. I'll literally think about it and go, right, what am I worried about? I'm worried about washing out there and crashing. Right, okay, that's fair enough. So then I'll go, right, well, what are we going to do about that? And I'll go, right, well, this is the line I've decided on riding. That's the risk I've got to accept if that's the one I'm going to go for. How are we going to ride it? Let's go through it and enjoy it. And when we come out of it, let's be buzzing we've come out of it. So all of a sudden I've turned a negative into a positive, and I'm going to come into that section and go, right, I'm going to have you.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's interesting that I think that most people would presume that a rider at your level doesn't get worried about sections, doesn't get scared because you're just
exactly
an animal
the same, just
rider.
at a different level.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same, just at a different level.
And you're not hiding from the fact that you're scared of it, because I think if I can think of a drop in my local woods that makes me nervous to ride, and you would naturally try to just push that fear to the side and either just ride it anyway or avoid it. But it's interesting that you're the exact opposite, and you're like, right, I'm definitely feeling nervous about that section of track, and then really analysing and focusing on that, which is interesting, because I think a lot of people would try and do the opposite and forget about it.
We do it in normal life as well, and this is like the Chimp Paradox book. Like, it helps because I'm such an experienced racer now, and I've got my processes that are just what I use, and they're there. The Chimp Paradox stuff helps me more in general life than it does with racing now. Because I've read the book 2 or 3 times, worked with a sports psychologist who specialises in that model. It helps me more with, like, because I'm a very fiery, like, can be impulsive, like pain in the ass, basically. That's probably what some of my friends and family would say about me if they'd probably word it stronger. So I have to be careful how I kind of am, and that model helps me so much in normal life, because like you've just said, like identifying the things that are potentially going to be hindering you, and then going, right, well, what am I going to do about that? Is it me or is it someone else? Because most of the time, if you modify your own behavior, you can then improve a scenario. Even if you think someone else is the problem, if you change, they'll probably change as well. So it's a good read.
I had somebody message me on Instagram, and he was racing, if I remember correctly, at like a national level, and he was saying that he always struggles with knowing how much training to do to get the best possible results to go from 3rd place to 1st place, and also balancing that with his family life. And he was saying that he feels guilty when he's with his family because he feels like he should be training harder. And then when he's training, he feels guilty because he's not with his family. Now, my answer to him was that I think it's normal to feel the job. 100%. So if if you go to the absolute highest level, if we go, Cristiano Ronaldo, not that I follow football, he will 100% put training, nutrition and sleep first, and everything else comes second. But that's to become the absolute top one in the world. Now, most of us don't want that total selfish life to become that, because you want a family and kids and a house and the rest of it. But then on the other side of it, if you only go riding once a week, you're not going to get anywhere near the level that you're at. So what would your reply have been to the guy who feels guilty when he's not doing either of those, and how have you sort of managed that balance?
So mine would be, I would ask him why he feels guilty, and the answer would probably be something around he's worried his wife and his kids are like feeling negative towards what he's doing. So my suggestion would be sit down with your missus over a coffee and a lunch and say, look, I want to spend maximum time with you guys, but I also want to train. So between us, what do we think is a fair balance? Because once he gets that approval from them, he can then say, well, I'm feeling guilty in the gym here, but hang on, my wife said I'm fine doing it. So I'm good. So let's just cook on and get on with it. And same when he's at home. He can go, right, well, I've made this structure. I'm not in a gym now, but this is what I've decided to do. So I'm at home. Let's focus on that. So talking with the people involved, making the plan where everyone's on the same page. Otherwise, you're sat in the gym going, what's my wife thinking? I'm going to get frosty look when I walk in the house. Fuck. So, because I've been there. I've literally been there. Bad communication and me going, babe, I'm working, I'm training. Whereas now it's just, everything's just kind of, she'll ask me what I'm doing this week and I'll say, oh, and sometimes I still do it now. I'm like, oh yeah, I get worked up by the question and I'm like, oh, I've got this and I've that. And I'm like, hang on, why am I getting annoyed? She just wants to know where I am and what I'm doing so that we can then coordinate around what the two of us have got going on. So communication is always the key.
Yeah. How old were you when you got with Sarah?
We met at uni in 2008. We then got together end of 2009. So I would have been 21. And we then got engaged.
So it was right around the time you started racing then, wasn't it?
Yeah. I've been lucky in that
racing
sense. And she's never understood it. She's not sporty. She's not from a sporty family. And certainly when I was at uni, her and the others that I was in the friendship group with used to take the piss, and they used to say, oh, Jack's going off for the weekend to have sex with his bike. And used to get all this kind of grief. And because I just started racing World Cups in 2010. So the first year we were together was when I started racing World Cup. So she'd never been to a race, didn't know what it was about. So we were on the same course at uni, and to her it was just I remember her parents saying to me like a couple of years into racing, like I was doing well. Like 2013 I was getting like top 30 results, like it was respectable stuff while doing a master's degree. And I remember her parents saying to me like, when are you going to start, like, sack this off and start working more optometry? I was doing like 1 or 2 days a week optometry in the summer and 3 or 4 in the winter so that I could balance the training. Again, like we just said, try and get a balance with it all. And I was like, you just don't get this, do you? Like I'm doing professional sport. And like even now, like I think they probably still wonder how I make it work. Like, because I don't do any optometry anymore. It's just the coaching, the team, the racing, the training. Like there isn't time. I do 50, 60 hour weeks. Like if I tried optometry as well, I wouldn't sleep. So back to what you asked about Sarah, like she's never really understood it for a long time. Even like coming out to the races, it was not being a sporty person. It was tough for her to wrap her head around something like you said, having to be my ultimate priority. And for many years, she felt like she was coming second to the biking. And we had like conversations where she was like feeling neglected in the relationship because she felt like the biking was more important than her. And that wasn't the case. It was just like you said, at that moment in time, I had to be ultimately focused on myself and what I was doing in training. Otherwise, the next guy would just beat me.
Yeah.
But then I've got better over the years of being more present when I'm home. I think that's just maturity as you get older. And when you're a younger athlete, it's just all consuming. You just want to be the best you possibly be. So it is tough for sure.
And I think on that note as well, there's a difference between spending time with someone and spending quality, present, focused 100%. Time with someone. And if you've got an absolute abundance of time, you might just sit on your phones. And me and Sophie do this. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But you'll sit and watch TV or play on your phones. And the difference between that or going on a date night for a meal with no phones, like they're drastically different.
100%.
So me and Sophie get plenty of time together, but I can only imagine that as you get less and less time, it's probably about quality of time as well, rather than just having all of the time, but not. And
I think what's funny as well is that, maybe I'm wrong here, but as you are reducing that amount of time by being busier elsewhere in life, you all of a sudden become even more lazy getting that quality time. And all of a sudden you may only have half an hour together, but you're tired or whatever. And then you do end up, like you said, ignoring each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is super important to like take a step back yourself and go, rather than pointing a finger at the other one and going, she's on her phone again, Well, hang on, why is she on her phone? are you actually being someone that she'd want to be around, or have you come home from work grumpy or whatever? And because I've been guilty of that, I've literally kind of gone through processes where I've been like, what? Why does she not seem interested in chatting with me or whatever, or hanging out? And then I take a step back and look at what I'm being like when I'm at home, and I'm like, I'm just being a dick. Like, I'm just being grumpy and preoccupied. And so a lot of the time it's...
But then on the other side of it, I think also that's kind of normal life in that
100%.
you are two people and you do have your own things. Like Sophie, my other half's a teacher. So our kind of process, if you like, is she works really hard through the week, works longer hours than I do, Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
She'll be working till 10 o'clock at night most nights, 9 o'clock most nights, marking and planning.
Yeah.
So we know that we don't get as much time through the week. We'll make time I'll speak to her on the phone when she's commuting. So we'll get that time to chat. But then on a weekend, we always have quality time.
Yeah,
and
nice.
every half term, we tend to go away somewhere for a break.
Nice.
So we both kind of know that we're not having as much time together through the working week, but we get the weekend and then we get a proper break with each other.
But
I think it's knowing, isn't it? Because for some people,
100%.
they won't be able to like handle that.
Yeah, but it's, you know, it's good that you've got that, because I didn't know when you started talking there, I didn't know which way you were going to go with that, because obviously with your job, you're going to potentially be busy on a weekend.
Yeah.
So if this wasn't handled well, you'd have the one person in the relationship saying, babe, I'm busy at the weekend. Like, stop marking so late in the evenings. And then you'd have her saying, no, I need to do that to be able to do my job and teach the next day. And, you know, that could, if handled the wrong way, become a volatile situation where the people aren't working together. Whereas, like you've said, you've both stood back and gone, right, well, the time we have is what it is, and we have to make sure we use that to the best. So
and we've
it's
gone
tough.
through very similar to with you and Sarah, where at first it's not like that,
Yeah,
because you
everyone
don't
will.
understand everybody. You get to the point,
Yeah,
and we still
everyone will.
definitely have times like if there's nights where Sophie's working till 11, I'm like, you really need to try and finish at 9:30, 10, just because I know that she'll get run down, tired, stressed when it's that late, because
100%.
you can only go 100% for so long and then it drops off. I think communication is the massive one though, like you said. I think
100%.
sitting down.
It's key to everything.
I think a lot of people don't do that though. So the amount of obviously I get thousands of messages over, a period of months. So you hear a lot of different people's opinions, and people will say like, how do I get my wife to understand that training's important? And it's always like, well, have you actually sat down and had that conversation where you explain what it's like? Because often people have thought they had, but they haven't. They might have said it in passing, but they've never actually sat down and gone, training helps me with X, Y, Z, and here's why it's so important to me.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's very difficult.
What's it like? You've obviously raced essentially would you class yourself as a privateer, or are you?
No.
So you have your
That would
full
be
absolute, your full, this is coming from someone who doesn't know all the terms, so definitely. You've got your full paid for pro, let's say Aaron Gwynn, as an example. And then on the absolute opposite side of it, if I decided I wanted to race, I'd be a total privateer with no sponsorship.
Yeah.
Is there kind of a mid-ground in between, and what does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I would classify a professional rider as someone who gets paid.
Okay.
So if you're getting paid, if you're finishing that season with money in your pocket, even if it's $2,000,
Yeah.
you've made money and it's cost you nothing.
Yeah.
So in that block, you've got people like Aaron who make a huge amount of money. And then you've got all the way down to, riders who are entry-level pros who are maybe getting all their expenses paid, and they keep the bikes, so they sell the bikes and make $6,000.
Yeah.
They're pros because they have $6,000 in their pocket off the back of racing their bikes.
Yeah.
You've then got the next category, which are people, and they're maybe not even all privateers. You'll get some guys on small teams who are having to pay some of their expenses. We'll have riders on our team next year who they'll be on a team and they'll have our support in terms of pit support, my coaching, support with SR Suntour suspension and Schwalbe tyres and whatever else the package allows, but we won't be paying their travel expenses, whether they're a youth or a junior or whatever. So they're not pros, but they're on a team.
Yeah.
You might get privateers, like Danny Hart may even be next year. He's out of a contract and he may even do his own program. So do you classify Danny as a privateer next year if he's running his own program?
So what would you class a privateer as? Is that somebody who literally just pays for everything themselves and rocks up his race? Or is
The
there not
term
really
has just become so varied now because
Okay.
some privateers get really good support.
Right.
And this is the thing with Roger Vieira. I don't know if you know who that is, but he's a Brazilian guy who lives in the UK. He's a friend of mine, rides for some of the same brands as I do. But he's never been on a team. And over the kind of last 2 to 3 years, he's stepped up his racing game. Before that, he was very much a fringe rider of whether he'd qualify or not. Whereas now, in the last 2 years, he's qualified at every World Cup. And people call Roger a privateer, but Roger gets really good support from SR Suntour, GT, O'Neill. So is that a privateer? I don't know whether Roger needs to spend any of his own money anymore. I think he potentially comes out green. I'm not sure. I don't know whether he'll listen to this or not, but if he does, maybe he can put in the comments whether he comes out green or red at the start of the year. So privateers now there's different, like you said about pro riders, there's different levels of privateer. So back in the day, a privateer was what me and my dad did for 2010, 11 and 12 and 13. When I was an entry-level World Cup rider, we went in my dad's van. We were spending 20 or 30 grand of our own money every year. We were supported by brands like O'Neill and Schwalbe who were helping us go to the races, but ultimately we were buying the bikes and it was costing us money. That's a privateer, someone who from America now is coming over with their parents and having to pay for all their own racing to try and go around the circuit. In my eyes, that's a privateer.
Yeah.
The guys who are getting good support and racing on their own, they're like individual professionals, if you like, because there's not enough teams. That's the problem with World Cup racing, high-level racing at the moment, is there aren't enough teams for the strength and depth of rider that there is now. The sport is now a proper professional sport, but there's not enough professionalism in the industry to cater for all these good riders. And this is what we're now going to do with our team. One of the other reasons I'm retiring is this year we've had 3 riders, with 2 grassroots riders as well that don't cause me any trouble. Next year we're 10. Now I couldn't run a 10 rider team while racing World Cups. Like I described earlier, when I'm racing a World Cup, I am fully focused on myself. And then I can help one guy, like my junior this year, Owen. It doesn't detract from what I'm doing. It can even help because Owen's a good rider. We work together, whereas if there's 10 of them or nine plus me, there's no way I can be focused on racing a World Cup while looking after all those guys. So we're making our team bigger to cater for more of this talent. And it's kind of the next phase of what I'm doing. But yeah, I mean, back to your original question, the privateer thing now has just become so like skewed.
Yeah. So of those, if we just said it was the same 60, just for argument's sake, that I know it'll be different every race. So of those then, what kind of percentage are your Aaron Gwyn's, your absolute top 1, 2, 3, 4? Are there 5 riders who are like the absolute biggest earners? Is it 10? Do you know what I mean? And then when you get to the bottom of the 60, what's the drop? You understand what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
Or is that not really talked about?
I'd say most of the top 60 now are in the green at the end of the year.
Yeah.
We had 8 different winners from 9 races this year.
Okay.
So the strength and depth at every level is increasing, and all 8 of those winners were pro riders who were earning good money riding bikes.
Yeah.
So it probably goes back to like 20 to 25 guys who are probably earning really good money now.
And what would you class as really good money, or does
probably over 100k?
Okay.
Ours. And then you're getting some guys who are earning like $500,000 or whatever, like the big boys,
names,
and then it then just drops off a cliff, basically. So whether I drew the line right at 20, I'm not sure. It might be 15, it might be 10. But from there, it drops off a cliff.
Right.
And everyone else is fighting over kind of what's left, which is 100k and down. To people who, like I say, you'll have guys in that top 60 overall who may just be coming out with selling a bike at the end of the year, and that's all they've got in their pocket to show for. But they're doing the hobby, so it's kind of 2 ways of looking at it. So.
But it sounds like what you mentioned at the very beginning of it is that it's becoming more of like, you said when you started racing, you were just riding on bridle rays and going off like the side of Duff Stones and whatnot and building it up yourself. Whereas now 10-year-olds are like at almost pro level.
At bike parks every day.
Yeah. That sounds like it's almost more like football where they're introduced as soon as they can walk. And so... Would you say that it's the sport maturing then, and do you think it'll just keep going down that direction where it become more and more professional, essentially?
It's a generational thing. So these kids have got dads who rode and raced, so now they want that. Their kids are getting into that sport.
Whereas the dad was one of the first to race.
Exactly.
Say Steve Peters, an example.
Exactly. So these kids are coming into it and they're bred to race, and it's going to be good for the sport for sure, because ultimately the sport will get bigger. But at the moment, certainly at the World Cup level, it's struggling to cater for all that talent. And people are just getting to like their mid to early 20s and they just don't have a ride anymore. Yeah. Just because they've had one bad season or whatever. It's like, it's tough.
What's your opinion on the direction that the Enduro World Cup, or the EDR as it's now called, is going in? Because I know there's rumours about it stopping in a couple of years. Like, it's been very shortened, hasn't it, to just races in Europe now?
Basically, it seems like the new organisers only give a shit about what they can televise.
Yeah.
They only care about their big show.
Yeah.
Because it's Warner Brothers Discovery now. So before it was Red Bull who were using us to advertise a product.
Yeah.
So they kind of cared about more elements of it. Whereas now all they care about is the TV package.
Yeah.
That's all they give a monkeys about. So yeah, it's enduro is hard to televise. Downhill's a lot easier.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the people in the enduro world are very upset because ESO started the Enduro World Series in 2013, I think, and then looked after that and developed it and really turned it into something. I did a few, I think I've done 10 of them. And they were good events, well run, and they went to a stage where they had this big media package that they used to, even not televise it, but they, good videos after the race and stuff, the recap videos. Whereas now there's nothing.
Yeah.
And it's really, really sad. And it's because all they care about is their TV package and what money they're making, and they don't see enduro as a big part of that. So they've just turning their back. And I've heard they're going to sack it off after 2024. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure.
So it's going to need someone else to step in then, is it? Like Red Bull before, who...
Well, you would think it would go the way it went with ESO, where some budding race organiser wants to take it on and will run an independent world enduro level. Because the sport won't die. Because the sport is ultimately rider driven.
Yeah. And
it's everyone's hobby and passion. Yeah. So it won't die. It will just go in a different direction because these guys are back on it.
So enduro's probably going to go downhill, excuse the pun. It's going to go downhill. What do you think is going to happen to the downhill World Cup then? Do you think that's going to sort of all these issues will get sorted and it'll get better, or do you see it just getting worse and worse?
Whether it'll get better now, I'm not sure, but ESO, Warner Brothers have got a contract of 8 years. They're not going away.
Okay.
So everyone's going to have to work with them.
Yeah.
I do think it will get better. When? I don't think it will be next year. We're hearing rumours that semi-final that everyone hates is going to stay. I'm quite glad they didn't just sack it off this year from a personal perspective, because I qualified for 6 out of 8 semis, whereas I didn't qualify in the top 30 once. So I wouldn't have raced a single final this year. Yeah. Whereas I was on YouTube 6 times. I got to have a nice season waving goodbye. So from a selfish perspective, it was great. It was there. But like Andorra, before I crashed, two corners from the end, I was running 15th. But that was just a final because of the weather. So if that had been a semi, I would have qualified through to the final. And to have had that run and then have to go up again, like, it's so much risk.
Yeah.
Like those runs that we're putting down, like I crashed, I didn't even make it to the line. Like we're literally pushing ourselves to the limit. And in Mont Saint Anne, especially, where in the semi-final they didn't even give anyone any points for semi-finals because it was the last round. So there's no prize money, no points. But everyone's going up there to fight for their start order or to try and fight to get through. It's brutal and everyone hates it, but it sounds like they're going to try and keep it for next year. And then the year after, sounds like they're looking at a totally different format where they may even have like just a different way of doing it, where a block of riders are like ranked in the first group and then the rest of the people fight to be in a second group that's like added for the final. Martin Whiteley was talking about it on our podcast. It's a good idea, but doesn't sound like there's going to be much change next year. Yeah, which, for a lot of guys means that they're going to be going through that same quali semi-finals process. So yeah, I do think it will get better, but when, it's hard to say. And ultimately you've got a huge company backing the sport and getting it on TV, so it has to be a good thing in the long run. But last year they put the team prices up, they put the pit space prices up, they made entry fees double, they made everything more expensive for us, they made everything harder for us, and they told us that the reason they were doing this was because they were making the sport bigger and we were going to get more from the sponsors because the sponsors were going to make more money. Well, that's horseshit, because everyone has cut budgets this year. Right. The industry's on its ass. Yeah. So they need to deliver on their promise, and over the next few years we need to be seeing sponsors earning more money off increased sales because they've increased the viewers and increased the size of the sport, so that it trickles all the way down through the teams and through the companies and through the riders, and everyone needs to be getting more. Because at the moment, as I said, even riders like Danny Hart are out of a contract.
Yeah, which is wild.
Exactly. So ultimately, at the moment, it's a load of noise.
Yeah.
And nothing good back in exchange, really.
Yeah.
So I do have faith in the long run. I feel like within that 8-year block, the sport will really become something that people who don't even ride bikes will be watching and engaging with, because I do think with Warner Brothers Discovery, they've got the tools there to create that. But at the moment, they're not doing a good job.
Yeah. You could see people who aren't riders getting into the sport as well. So if you look at something like Red Bull Rampage as an extreme example, that's interesting whether you ride bikes or not, because you're seeing people hooking off cliffs.
Yeah.
If that could happen to World Cup as well, I think that can only be a good thing, because more people will then start riding and there's more money, and
Yeah, exactly.
it goes in that.
Whereas at the moment, watching a World Cup, I don't watch them when I'm not there, but just because of, it's something I do the sport, I'm not probably going to, watch it. But people who I talk to who do watch it, they just get bored, because there's the semi and then the final. Even if you're like the most diehard of fans, you're watching the same thing twice.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
It's like watching Man United play Man City.
Yeah, of course.
It's 1-1.
And then again.
And then they go again.
Yeah.
And it's 1-1 again. Well, I was bored the first time.
Yeah.
Because, I'm not a watcher, I do sport.
Yeah.
So you've got to think that the people who don't ride bikes are going to be like me. It's going to be tough to get them engaged in a sport that they're not even doing.
Yeah.
So just showing the same thing twice. What?
Yeah.
Like, I think they're going the right way with trying to get different camera angles and this, that, and the other. But a lot of the time it didn't work. Like my snowshoe race run, I come out of the woods at the bottom to sprint to the finish line. And it cut to a drone shot. The drone was in Canada. You couldn't even see me. Like, it angers me because I'd had such a good race run. I'd enjoyed it. And then I come out of the woods hauling, and then I'm this little dot riding towards the finish on this crap drone shot. Why was this drone not 4 foot behind me, chasing me to the finish? So they've got the tools there to make this an engaging show. They're just not doing it very well. And I think a lot of people who have talked about it are kind of dancing on eggshells, because they're like thinking, there's these big, like, no, let's tell them you're doing a shit job. Ultimately, you've done some things well. Yeah. But Red Bull did most of it well by the end. So you've come in, and as George said, who I do my podcast with, he's a professional producer. And he said, tender him for something. When you get it, the minimum requirement is to deliver something as good as what you've just taken over from. Of
course.
And in my opinion, like, the whole package this year wasn't as good as what Red Bull were doing last year. So they need to up their game for next year.
And hopefully it's just growing pains and it will get better.
You would think so, with the size of the company that they are. But a lot of the things we saw this year were like the staff on the ground, like there was definitely less of them.
Right.
Because they've got less budget, because all they care about is their TV package.
Yeah.
So they want to make money. So they seem to have less people involved to deliver. There's some of the things that went on at Sign On, and honestly, it was just a joke. So
hopefully it will improve.
I genuinely believe it will.
Yeah.
But at the moment, they need to hear that people are not impressed from any level.
Yeah.
And they, instead of, like I said, we've talked about it earlier in the podcast about communication, like, they need to just take that on board and not get all offended and like, no, take a step back and go, we're hearing this from people who've been in the industry for a long time.
Yeah.
Let's take it on board. We might not like it. What are we within our power to do? And they might not be within their power to do everything that everybody wants.
Yeah, of course.
But they can certainly listen to all the messages and go, right, well, we're hearing all this noise. What can we take from it that seems to be consistent to improve and learn from? So
I agree. Well, I think for the last sort of 5-10 minutes of the podcast, I'd love to hear about your coaching business and how you help people, who it's for, and all that side of it. Because I imagine that's, a great venture that you're doing, isn't it, in the minute?
Yeah, super.
Well, you've done for a long time.
Yeah, super rewarding. My main passion for it is because I never had any of that help. So like I said, it was me and my dad for those 3 or 4 years when I was learning the sport of World Cup downhill. I was just like, I loved racing, and I'd got fast when I lived in Winter, and I lived in Whistler, and come back and started racing, and I had to just learn myself. And there are so many things that I've seen while coaching and been able to tell people off the back of my experiences that I wish someone had been there to tell me. Like when I qualified 12th at Val di Sole in 2011, I crashed the next day. And I know for a fact that day, 21 or 22, however old I was, the team managers were watching me. And I crashed. and I came 38th, which was still a good result, but I flipped the bars. My run was super sketchy. If I'd had somebody there to just say to me, Jack, you rode that bike down the hill yesterday. You qualified 12th. You did that. Your best yesterday was 12th. So just chill and just go up that hill today, be relaxed, and just go and ride your bike and just do that. And that's exactly what I said to Dan Slack in 2021 when he qualified 11th at Maribor. First year elite, qualified 11th. I just said to him, I said, Dan, you are bossing it. You just look so relaxed. You're enjoying riding your bike. Just keep doing that. Don't feel pressured by the fact you've out-qualified this person, that person, because you did it. You don't have to go up there and be somebody else. And that's why I enjoy it so much, because nobody was there to say that to me on that day in Val d'Isole.
Yeah.
And I went up there and tried to be someone else because I didn't feel, imposter syndrome it's called.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like my best was going to be enough. And that's why I crashed. Top split, I was on pace with guys who were top 10. And if I'd rolled that bike down even into a top 15, I would have probably got a team ride for the following year, and my career would have been potentially been a little different, less of a struggle. So off the back of it, I'm now in such a privileged position to be a professional athlete, have my own race team, have my own coaching business, have great partner sponsors who help me do this. We can now coach through every level. So the way my gravity school works is we have the base level where anybody can come to me for a coaching session. We don't really do beginner level coaching. We do coaching for guys primarily who race. We do coach people who don't race because ultimately a lot of people have Strava and they want to beat their mates. That's a form of racing. So I can teach anybody to be a better bike rider and a more efficient bike rider and be faster. But the bread and butter stuff is people who come to me for the uplift sessions we run, and we coach at that level. The next level above that is the guys who are performing well and will start doing discounts, and they might start coming on more of my kind of team group session days where they're paying a little bit less and they're getting to ride with some of my team guys, and they're just getting to kind of ride with us at that level. The next level above that is the guys who I take on at a grassroots level on the team. Like I've had Finn Sykes and Ruben this year, where they get a bit of support and they get some reduced rates on stuff. They get some sessions free. If that goes well, they'll then join the team like we're doing this year with these 10 guys. All 10 of those guys I've coached. Don't work with anyone. We're a development program. You don't just jump in at the top. We develop athletes. So that next level is guys who will join the team, and we will develop at the next level, whether they're 15 and we're developing them at European Cups, or whether they're riders like Dan and my other elites this year who we're going to be hopefully taking to World Cups. The next level above that is what we did with Dan in 2021, where he was actually paid. We actually had a little bit of budget from Commensal to be able to give Dan some money at the end of the year. So he was the only athlete we've ever had, excluding myself, who's been what I regard as a professional athlete riding for my team. He ended the year with full expenses paid, green light, off the back of racing.
Brilliant.
Forms. So that's the way the pyramid works. And ultimately, we just want to get bigger and bigger so that we can support more riders at every level. And that's what we've done this year. Or for next year, we're moving from that 3-rider guy team, or 3-rider person team. We're not exclusively men. We had Anna ride for us last year. Obviously, the sport is heavily male dominant. I think I've only coached one female this year, who's a girl called Amelia, and that's simply because that's just how many people have asked.
Got in touch. Yeah, of course.
So yeah, we're going to try and expand, and we want to get to a point where we're covering every category. Next year, we're going to cover second year youth, first year junior, second year junior, and then elites through, can't remember how old they'll be, 20, 21 and 22, I think. So that's basically the structure of the Gravity School, and I just have such a huge passion for it because I love helping these guys and seeing their success, racing alongside them. It keeps me feeling young. Sometimes they remind me how old I am, especially with some of the music they listen to and some of the gang signs they do on their podiums. I'm not in touch with all that kind of kid stuff.
I feel like the old man in the room.
100% sometimes. Even my mechanic's 23, and even Sam sometimes is like, what? I ask him, I'm like, what, Sam, what are they doing? And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, good, well, if you don't know, that makes me feel better.
I'm 30, just about to turn 31, and obviously you feel the same as 20, as I imagine you do at 50. At 30, you think that you're still the same as a 20-year-old until you spend 10 minutes with a 20-year-old, and then you think, I'm nowhere near 20.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and this is the thing, like, shout out to Ruben, he probably won't listen, but Ruben Taylor, who's been one of my grassroots riders this year, he's really good at this, and a lot of guys who are young and ride for teams or race. I mean, I don't think young people really listen to podcasts, but maybe they do. If they are listening, being able to adapt to your environment as one of those young people is so important. And Ruben's great at it. He can be as young and immature as he wants with his mates, but he's really good at when he's around me and the team, he can switch and he can become a more mature, more observant guy who is aware of what I expect and pick his timing for when he's going to be a dickhead.
Yeah.
Because I'm the biggest dickhead in the room when the timing's right.
Yeah.
If I'm with clients or I'm working or, you know what I mean? So these young guys at the age of 15, 16, if they want to be professional athletes, they have to start to learn that stuff.
Yeah.
And learn at home to like, how does a washing machine work? Oh, I'll wash up tonight, mum. Because when you're away with a team, if you behave like a kid, we're going to give you a hard time.
Yeah.
It's going to get real hard real early.
Oh, awesome. Well, I think it sounds fantastic. So it's really interesting to hear that you've got all those levels as well. I had no idea about all of that. So presumably anybody can get in touch. It's a 50-year-old guy who's racing and who has no interest in going up to the top. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. So prime example of that is George, who I do the podcast with. He's 49. He's going up to Grand Vet category next year, loves racing. And I don't think George will mind me saying there's an awful lot wrong with the way he rides a push bike. He knows that. And I'm really looking forward to coaching him because there's so many areas we can improve, he's in a nice position where there's like 20 or 30 seconds we can find.
Yeah.
The harder level coaching is where everything's kind of going really well with a rider.
Of course.
They move well, they load the bike well, they understand the bike to rider relationship. And then you're looking for tenths of seconds. Whereas with George, we're kind of changing the way his body position is on the bike first. So George is 49 and coached him last week. Give him an awful lot of homework to do over the coming weeks. And by homework, I just mean get out and ride.
come and practice.
And while you're riding, think about the things I've pointed out and when he feels like he's made some developments, come back for a follow-up session. Yeah. So literally, as I say, I don't do kind of
absolute beginners.
I've done some stuff. I did coach another girl actually this year called Becky over at Grenoside, and she was, you'd probably call her a beginner to low intermediate level rider, just wanted to get better at jumping. But that's not my bread and butter coaching. I've got a friend, Ben, give Ben a shout out over at, you may know Ben at We Ride.
He's there on Friday.
Oh, there you go. So,
he's coming on Friday.
So shout out to Ben. If you are kind of more of a beginner level rider and just want to improve those kind of intermediate skills, I send people Ben's way. Ben does the opposite. Versa. If someone's like Hayden, who I coach, amazing rider, 15. Ben's coached him for years. Passed him on to me about 18 months ago.
That makes sense.
And now racing at a good level. So it's kind of, there's nothing for hours in the day, mate. Like I say, I'd love to coach everyone, but there isn't time. I've been toying with the idea of running like a thing in Saddleworth, just teaching people, like just on the Saddleworth playing fields, just like have a tent there, have the mechanic, and teach people basic body position and maybe just a bit of a wheelie manual clinic. And I'd love to do it, but it's finding the time to do it, and I'm not sure if people are interested. Maybe people can put in a comment to this. It's a local podcast. Like if anyone is interested in that, just a couple of hours, I'll turn up with the guys, and I'd love to be able to do stuff like that, just interact with people who ride at any level and just teach them some basic stuff, because ultimately it's just learning the process and then applying those processes and practicing. So anyone can do it. We're all human.
I agree. And I think something that you just said would be a great place to end the podcast on. You touched on, with people like George, he comes to you and there's loads of areas for improvement. I think that people in that position can sometimes be disheartened by that. And I have it the same thing with training, where someone will try an exercise plan and they'll be like, oh, I'm so sore today. I really struggle with those squats and those press ups or whatever the exercise is. And I always say, and it's genuinely it, if they've done a workout and really struggled with it, brilliant, because that shows that you've got so much room for improvement. And it's the same with riding, isn't it? If you come and you really struggle, that's great, because as a beginner or intermediate, you improve so much quicker with your fitness and with your skills if there's room for improvement. At the highest level, it's, marginal. But if you're really struggling with your fitness and you do a ride and it's really hard, that's good, because you'll improve so much faster.
I couldn't agree more. Like, I literally wouldn't change anything you've just said. And you have to have an attitude like I have, where areas where you can improve, don't take that shit personal. It's not a weakness. It's just an area where you can be better. And the prime example that I'm going through right now is I've always wanted to do out and out CrossFit, but I've always held off while I've raced World Cup level, because there's this stigma around injury with CrossFit. And I started a month ago, and I am the idiot in the room. And I fully accept that. And the prime example was I think it was last Tuesday, we were doing strict ring muscle ups as part of the workout, and I'll give anything a go. There's 20 odd people in there. Everyone's real nice, and if I can't do it, I can't do it, but I'm going to try. And I got helped by the coach twice. Managed to like get this done, and on the first attempt on my own, I kind of almost looped out of it, but obviously being pretty strong from all the training I do, I managed to hold on to it. And I just found it so funny. Like I was like, I didn't even know what happened to me at first. And then I kind of still had hold of the rings. I was kind of upside down. I was laughing, and like half the room was laughing, half the room was like, I think, embarrassed for me. And I just kind of laughed a bit, and then eventually just like dropped down. But I was like, I was more embarrassed for the people who were embarrassed for me. I just thought it was funny. So I kind of give it 30 seconds, said to the coach, I was like, what did I do wrong? And she was like, you didn't keep your elbows tucked in. Your elbows came out. And that's why when that happened, you just rolled through. So I was like, right, as a coach myself, I was like, right, cool, thanks. Give it 30 seconds and was like, right, can I get an area of about 4 or 5 people, please, just around here, just for when this goes wrong again? And, you know, a few people kind of, again, didn't know what to like think, but it's just learning.
Of course it is.
So I just jumped back up and I nailed the next one.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'd been like embarrassed by what I'd done wrong, I wouldn't have got back up on the rings. And there were a couple of people there, stronger than me probably, they wouldn't try because you could see they were scared of what would happen if they embarrassed themselves. And it's like, you're just holding yourself back. Like, you know, the people who maybe in that room were judging me, to me, I'm like, fuck off. Like,
I think the people that judge you, though, I think the people that were embarrassed are only embarrassed for you because they would have been embarrassed in that situation. And I always say that the only people at races or at a bike park or whatever who are judging beginner riders are the people who have the issues. It's always the bullies that have the issues. It's their insecurities. That's why I think people like, you know, me and you and whoever, you don't judge anybody else. What I think is the takeaway from that, though, which will be a great place to end, is that someone who's at the absolute top of the sport of mountain biking is still a complete beginner when they go and try something else.
100%.
And so there's nothing wrong with being a beginner and not very good at something. You just learn, don't you?
Yeah. Like I almost knocked the chalk over after doing some kipping pull-ups. It was in this bucket was in the wrong place. I'd dropped the dumbbells at the end of a set on Thursday from a height, and the coach had to come and tell me not to drop them after my last devil press rep. Like you can only know what you know.
Yeah.
You can't know something you don't know.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, you've just got to accept that, right? Well, yeah, I'm going to potentially be the worst in the room today, but it means I've got the most opportunity to improve. So, yeah, just is what it is. And you've just got to kind of, like you said, I think Cole said it on the podcast you did, there are horrible people everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's not loads of them.
No, there's not.
And you just got to ignore them.
Yeah, exactly. Their opinion does not need to affect your life.
Yeah, whatever. So, yeah, I just don't give a monkeys, so...
Well, on that note, thank you so much for coming on. And for those listening, I'll put the link to the Gravity School in the bio as well, so they can have a click of that and go and check it all out. Yeah, absolutely. Check us out. We are super busy because shout out to all of my riders and my clients, all been absolutely amazing this year. But best way, if you're interested, get in touch. There's no notifications that don't get read, so get in touch on the Instagram and we will get back to you. And nice one. Thank you so much for coming on. Pleasure, mate. Nice to see you.